Brilliant stuff. Okay, cool. So I think it's probably about time that we got started. Thanks everyone for signing in and registering and joining. Hopefully this is going to be a really good, fun session. Let me start my video so I can wave. Check we're recording. Yes, cool. So obviously you guys know what you've signed up for because you've registered, but the session today is really all about LinkedIn advertising and how to improve your game. So hopefully this is useful for people who are getting started. There's some basic stuff in here with regards to kind of campaign settings and that type of stuff, but also people who have run campaigns before and are looking for a few more advanced tips or are looking for kind of details on what works and what doesn't work. So hopefully it's useful for everyone. So yeah, why hang around? We're basically going to go through like 5 rules that we've found to be true for running LinkedIn ads. So this is really about, okay, settings that are going to help you, kind of approaches to testing, creative that are going to help you, but kind of more so like what strategies tend to work well on LinkedIn versus what strategies don't work so well on LinkedIn. And therefore kind of what we really see as making the difference between success and failure. Please, like, massively important point here for me, like, it makes it way more enjoyable, way more fun if everyone's asking questions and like waving via the Zoom functions. There's loads of stuff in there, so you should be able to find the QA panel where you can ask questions. Obviously just say hi in the chat and wave. That's always good fun too. And yeah, hopefully we can all have a good time, but the more questions you ask, the better. Interrupt what we're doing. I think we've got one in the QA there already, which is great, so thank you. And on that note, like, Ellie's on hand. I think she said hello earlier. Hello.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Hey, so yeah, Ellie's going to be on hand to kind of just help a little bit with QA, and then we'll have a whole bunch of QA time, hopefully at the end as well. So before we kind of go into the real details on kind of how to set up campaigns and campaign settings and bidding and that type of stuff, I wanted to start off with like a bunch of like really key points that I've found to be true and things that you should definitely consider if you're setting up a LinkedIn campaign. The first one is this: like, you are going to need a absolute bucket load of patience. The platform itself is brilliant, but it can be very difficult to work with sometimes. It's buggy. It's kind of not quite as sophisticated as other platforms like Facebook, for example, or Google Ads. You know, it breaks sometimes, it just turns off, but it's well worth kind of persevering with. The other thing is it's really not cheap. So compared to other platforms like, again, like Facebook or Google Ads, you know, you could be running a campaign on Facebook and paying between 10 to 15p per click, but running an equivalent campaign on LinkedIn and paying around about £7 to £8. So that's a pretty significant difference. It means you need a fair bit of budget to get started with. It really means the like the learning curve is incredibly steep. So if you're not looking for the right things and you haven't got the campaign set up in the right way, that you're going to run out of budget pretty quickly. However, and this is LinkedIn data, of course, but I've got no reason to kind of doubt any of this. 61 million senior level influencers on the platform, 41 million decision makers. So if I'm trying to market my business, if I'm trying to get new leads in, if I'm trying to kind of get my business in front of the right people, this would suggest that LinkedIn is a very worthwhile place to be. Also, according to LinkedIn data, 78% of B2B marketers rate LinkedIn as the most effective platform for generating leads or promoting their content. So these are all very significant reasons as to why LinkedIn is a good place to be. And like, this is quite a genuine statement on what we've found with LinkedIn. And despite the frustrations, despite the heavy costs, it's amazing at very specific things. So unlike, let's say, search or maybe traditional display where you could maybe do more stuff, so from awareness through to just generating traffic, through to generating leads, through to getting webinar registrations like this, LinkedIn tends to be good at a smaller number of things. So we'll run through exactly what those are shortly, but we have found it to be very effective. And when you get it right, the cost per lead and the quality of leads are far kind of superior to other platforms. So well worth persevering. Okay, so this is really the first rule, and one of the things that I've found makes the biggest difference between success and failure. So like, you absolutely have to have a content asset before you start, and you have to have an asset that people are going to care about. Now, like, this could be a webinar, it could be a white paper, it doesn't really matter specifically what it is, it has to add value, of course. But if you're running a campaign without an asset, so to a sales page, for example, or just straight to a service page, my gut feeling is you're really going to struggle. Like, what I found to work really well on LinkedIn is promoting an asset. So running ads to an asset to collect a contact and then enter people into a sales funnel or an email sequence or whatever it is. If you're just trying to get traffic to a page and hoping it's going to convert, like, it's really, really difficult. And the expense of the traffic on LinkedIn means that it's just not really the best place for generally boosting traffic, or in my mind, just awareness. So if you're trying to drive a specific decision, you have to have an asset. And out of everything in this presentation, so campaign setting, everything, like, this is the most important point. So stuff that works, like, the mistake that I think a lot of people make often is that they're looking for something that they think they need to invest a lot of time in. And that's not always the case. So I believe what you really need to be thinking about here is, okay, what can we do quickly as a business? What's cost effective? So isn't going to cost the earth to get going and is going to provide genuine value. So that could be a webinar like this. It could be a series of video tutorials. It could be an event you're promoting. It could be an ebook. Many things work. You have to get the topic right, of course, but it doesn't always have to be hugely expensive. So like this webinar on the screen here, this Facebook ads webinar that we ran in November, that was a presentation that I ran at a conference. So I already had the deck. I tweaked it a bit. Really didn't take a huge amount of time to get that up and running. Cool. So that's really the first point. So the second thing, once you've worked that out, we have a question here. So which are the assets that you know that don't work? Good question. So it's a difficult one, though. I've found there's a real sweet spot between having a broad topic that is going to attract or be relevant to the majority of your target audience, but not so broad that it's too vague. If you go too specific, so like a very detailed piece of research on a very specific niche thing, that might struggle, or you're just limiting your chances. So, like to take this webinar as an example, like LinkedIn ads training is relatively broad, but still kind of relevant. If we'd done something on, bidding strategies for text ads on LinkedIn for the finance industry, still useful, but probably limiting our chances. So that's really what I'd be thinking about. And as a business, I would have thought, like, just build up a sense of what your audience want, really, is my advice. Hope that helps a little bit. Thumbs up emoji in the chat if it did. Thumbs down if it didn't. Okay, cool. On to the next point. So ad choices. Again, like, this is a big mistake that a lot of people make, is they'll pick the wrong campaign or ad type. So your basic choices when you're setting up a campaign, you've got 4 choices now. So, perfect. Thank you, Fernanda. So you've got sponsored content, dynamic ads, which are basically dynamic display ads, text ads, again, display ads that you see on the side, and then sponsored email, which are the sponsored email sends. So there's really dramatic differences in performance between these 4 ad types. So like we typically start off with sponsored content. So the reason being, like, it's natural, it's native, it just suits the platform really well, obviously, because it's a standard post but sponsored in the feed, and it's far more predictable. So if you take InMail, for example, you're paying per send, which means you could in theory end up paying to send 1,000 InMail messages and then get no clicks because you've paid for the send. Whereas sponsored content, it's a bit more predictable. You're going to get traffic to your landing page unless something goes very badly wrong. It's easy to get going. You don't have to put a huge amount of creative resource into it. It's a really good format. So if you're going to get started there. And then you've got a choice. So within sponsored content, you can run single image ads, you can run video ads, you can run carousel ads. Single image ads, again, like it's pretty straightforward, but we tend to find they work best. We've had varying degrees of success with carousel ads, very similar to the carousel ads you'd see on Facebook. And then video ads, still relatively, amazingly, it's still a relatively new format on LinkedIn. So being Microsoft, you can do MP4 only, and 3 seconds to 30 minutes. And there's a few different kind of resolutions you can upload there. But like, we've had by far the greatest success with single image ads on the sponsored content. So in terms of what typically works well within sponsored content, it again, test it. Like, you've got to test everything. The best advice with the copy is don't go beyond 150 characters, because that's when you will almost certainly start getting truncation on your copy, so that read more button. And then if someone clicks the read more button, that's a click. So it's going to affect your cost. So keeping below 150 characters keeps the copy snappy, but it also means that you are not paying for additional clicks that aren't delivering traffic to your website. Images, brighter colors if possible. So anything that's going to stand out from the feed. So like purples, reds, that kind of stuff tends to do pretty well, as long as you can make it work within the feed. So it's got to stand out but not be too crazy. Again, it can be quite simple, so you don't have to design like a crazy branded piece of work. Like test it out. So like a branded illustrative type image versus completely non-branded, and see what happens. We've seen kind of really big increases from just going non-branded, like a standard image. The headline feature, keep it short and snappy. My advice is use it as an additional CTA. So focus on the benefits, focus on the action that you're looking to drive. Maria, question: yes, we've found single images to be, I'd say, more predictable. Like, try a carousel, but yeah, I think single images for us have been the most consistent. Oh yeah, by the way, for the QA, that I forgot to say earlier, we've purchased a novelty clown's horn, which, like, go on, give it a honk. I think everyone can hear that. Yeah, it costs £2 and it alerts me to a question. So if you want to annoy me with a really annoying clown's horn sound, go for it. Ask a question.
I've just had another quick question regarding images. So do images that link to the asset impact the success of a LinkedIn ad?
Yes, definitely. So again, test different things. So test whether or not an image that reflects what you're offering versus an image of people enjoying the thing that you're offering, for example. Test different things. But yeah, the image, I would say the image is probably the most important point on the sponsored content ad. Assuming your copy's okay, like, the image is going to make the biggest difference. Frequency capping. So this is something that LinkedIn don't tend to publicize a massive amount, but they do have frequency capping in place on sponsored content campaigns. So it's basically a frequency cap of 1 within 48 hours. So if your ad is served and someone sees that ad once, that ad will not be served to the same person within the same 48-hour period. So obviously make sure that you have a number of different variations of ads within the campaign so you can test, but also really make sure that you are putting in enough variations to get consistent visibility. So if you only have one ad, A, you're not going to know whether or not another image would have worked better, but B, you're only going to get one impression per person per 48 hours. So that's definitely something worth considering. Okay, cool. So lead forms, like given the fact that we're saying, or like what we've seen is that LinkedIn as a platform works best when you're trying to drive a specific action, such as a sign up for a webinar or an event or a download a white paper. Lead forms are probably one of the most significant developments within the platform over the last 2 years. And it's similar to if anyone here has run Facebook lead forms, very similar. So the idea is that someone clicks on the ad to get a download or sign up for a webinar, and the form pops up within the app. It's pre-populated with their details, and it means they can convert pretty seamlessly. The issue with it is that most people have signed up to LinkedIn with their personal email address, and as a sales lead or sales inquiry, that can make things difficult because people generally tend to be a little bit less responsive on their personal email address. So if you are doing this, be aware of that is an outcome, which has to be managed. So make sure you contact people quickly, get a work email address, do all those types of things to see if you can convert them back to the work email address. However, they do work very, very well. Clearbit. Perfect. Thank you, JH. If you could drop a link in, that'd be amazing. We'll see if he does. Okay, cool. So in terms of what you can collect on the LinkedIn lead forms, it's fairly, there's a fair amount of choice. So obviously contact information like email, phone, location, that type of stuff, work information, so seniority, job function, company details, education information. Probably one of the most important things is that you can ask a question. So you can ask a question to qualify a lead. So if you have qualification criteria, it's a really good way of just making sure that you're going to get people into your system that meet that criteria. So, how much someone spends on advertising, or how many units someone might be willing to order, or, whatever it is, you can put these questions in there. Hunter.io. And there's the Chrome plugin for that as well here, which is amazing. Perfect. So yeah, JH is just popping a few. If you open up the chat, of course it is. So JH has popped you a few things in the chat which can help you connect up, or kind of if you have ended up with a load of personal email addresses from your campaign, connecting those to work email addresses. So a couple of tools you can use there. Okay, so really important point. If you are okay, let me just copy them in. There we go. We have another question.
Yes, sorry.
Go for it.
Do you feel lead forms directly through the ad generate more leads than one's own if it requires them to click less?
Yes. Yeah. Like we've seen increases in conversions of around kind of 25 to 30% on campaigns where we've tested lead forms versus traffic to a landing page and then converting through a form. So yeah, they do work really well. Cool. On that note though, like this is a really important point. So if you are using lead forms, like you absolutely have to connect them up to a CRM or whatever system you're using to manage your leads. So Zapier is a tool that we use for that. It has connections to the likes of HubSpot, Pipedrive, Salesforce, Soho. So pretty much, pending a kind of a self-built system. If you're using something off the shelf, Zapier will have a connection that allows you to fire the data collected from a lead form straight into whatever system you're using. One really important point when you're doing that, absolutely make sure in the settings of that connection that you have specified where that contact has come from. So, if it's a webinar, make sure the source type is marked as such. So HubSpot, for example, the source type is a custom property that's added to a contact. And that means, in 3 months, we can look at how many contacts have been added through a webinar versus a download on an ebook or a download on a case study or something like that. We can look at the number of subsequent deals created. We can create retargeting lists. We can do all sorts of different things. So making sure that you've got the ability to analyze that data in the future is really important, because that means you can put a monetary value against the activity, which is, of course, exactly what we need to be doing. So rule 4, test your audiences, but again, LinkedIn doesn't make it the easiest thing to do. So just to run through the types of targeting, there's lots of options. So easily one of the most powerful parts of LinkedIn is the targeting. Job titles, job functions, seniority, company sector, all these types of things are available for targeting. You can layer one on top of the other. You can use exclusions. It's all there to play with. One of the things that, again, isn't necessarily made obvious. So job titles is essentially like an exact match search. So if I put, I want to target sales directors, then I'm only going to target people with the job title sales director. Whereas job functions are much broader. So I can target someone who has the job function of sales or the job function of marketing and try and catch everything I possibly can. However, if I do that, I definitely want to put some exclusions in place. So if I'm using the job function targeting, this is just an example, I would then want to exclude probably entry-level roles, any role that's probably not my target audience in terms of the decision maker. And it depends on the campaign, but because job function is broad, if you're using one of the broader targeting methods, always layer on some form of exclusion to tidy things up. If you're kind of looking for job titles, just running searches on things like Indeed are a really good way of kind of looking up job titles and getting inspiration for sectors that you may be unfamiliar with. Google Suggest, all that type of stuff. Another question, go for it.
Do you know if job titles are translated into native languages if targeting different countries?
That's a really good question. I believe so, but that's well worth checking into. Yeah, I don't know the specific answer on that. I would believe so, but check. Okay, cool. So yeah, definitely want to add some filters to the targeting. So again, it depends on qualification criteria, but if you only want to speak with companies of a certain size, for example, you can exclude smaller companies. Years experience can be a good way of making sure that you are trying to kind of target more people towards the decision maker end of the spectrum. That's a really good one. Seniority is a good one too. But I would say if you're building out an audience, definitely make sure you're putting on some form of qualification filter or criteria on the top. Member groups are amazing. We again consistently see these doing really well. So the whole point here is let's say we want to target people who work in PPC and run Google Ads campaigns. There isn't a job function available for PPC. There isn't there aren't many job titles coming up as targeting criteria for PPC. However, there are lots of groups where people discuss things like PPC. So member group targeting is saying, I want to target everyone who's in the PPC hero group. Now, I know that the only people in the PPC hero group are people who like PPC. So it's a really good way of getting specific niche targeting when a job title or a breadth of job titles or the job function isn't available through those methods. Phantom Buster, like this is a really good LinkedIn search scraper. So you basically hook it up and it will go to LinkedIn. You can put your search criteria in. So I want to look for groups to do with PPC or whatever it is, and it will scrape that out and it will put it into a CSV. So if you want to do group research or targeting research at scale, this is quite a good option. Account-based targeting is another really good point that's worth doing. So if you just do company name in the standard targeting options, you'll get about, I think it's 10 companies that you can put in per campaign. Whereas the matched audience for target companies, you can upload a CSV with 1 to 300,000 company names. 1,000 to 300,000 company names. And then once you've done that, you can obviously then upload or layer on your job title or job function targeting on top to make sure that you're talking to the right people in the right companies. In terms of the ideal audience size, it's a question we talk about a lot. It really depends on budget and how long you're running the campaign for and what the objective is. So I would say what we've seen is if you're running a short 1 to 2 week campaign for a specific asset, about the 100,000 mark works well. If you're running a much larger campaign that's going to be always on and it's going to be long term, you'll probably want to go bigger than that. But really for us, this is about driving specific actions over a specific time frame, and we've found the sweet spot around this size of the audience. And then because there's no A/B split testing for audiences, make sure that you are setting your campaigns up to enable this, right? So you want one campaign for, let's say, job title targeting, one campaign for member group targeting, one campaign for key account targeting, label them as such, and then run them within the campaign group to get the view of performance across them. But sadly, the A/B split testing functionality just isn't quite there on the self-serve campaign manager just yet. Hopefully that's something that will come soon. So in terms of settings, we'll finish up with settings. Bids, I would say avoid the automated bid as much as you can. It kind of, I've never seen it work well. Bids go really high, CPCs are really high. I would say always get control and go with the manual bid. When you go to enter a bid, LinkedIn will give you a range. So it will say, based on your criteria, similar advertisers are bidding between £4.36 to £7.80. My advice is start towards the top end of that. So as a strategy, generally speaking, start with the highest, a high bid. So we go back, start with a high bid. That means you'll be getting preferential placements in the feed, so you'll be further up the feed. That means you'll be getting a higher CTR. That means you'll get a higher, basically it's like a LinkedIn relevance score, which means you'll be then entered into more ad slots. So once you get to that point, momentum starts to build. You're spending your budget. You're in a good position on the feed. Your CTR is good. At that point, you can test dialing back the CPC bid. So, okay, I'm on £7. What if I go back to 650? Okay, I'm maintaining my CTR. What if I go back to 620? And you can just start kind of seeing how much you can get for your budget at that point, and just track CTR. So we use Supermetrics all the time. It has a pretty good LinkedIn ads connector. This is just a view on the first week or so from a LinkedIn campaign that we ran, and you can see the CTR across time. We can see that the first few days it's up and down a bit, and then it goes down, and it starts coming back up consistently. And it's at that point where things stabilize. Okay, dial it back a little bit. I'm still getting a good CTR, dial it back a little bit more. And that's when you start to get as much as you can from your budget. Audience expansion, I wouldn't use it. It's basically LinkedIn's lookalike. So I've not really found it to be very good. I prefer to kind of use the specific targeting. I found that to be best. It drives the best results. I generally just turn it off. So test it, of course, but my view is keep it off. And always save your audiences. If something happens with the campaign manager, or if you're trying to duplicate a campaign and it's having a bad day and it won't let you, if you've saved your audience, it's so easy just to spin up a new campaign because you set it up, you select your ads again, you load your saved audience in, job done. So this will save you so much pain and hassle and heartache. Just make a habit of saving every audience. Cool. So just to round up, basically, before you get anywhere near a campaign, make sure you've really carefully thought about what assets you can offer. It genuinely, it will make the difference between success and failure. It's the biggest point. Test creative, but start simple. Use sponsored content. Try and see what CTRs you can get. Compare different images, but keep it simple. Test different audience targeting methods. So even if you're on a low budget, just try testing 2 against each other, but always test because the differences can be fairly large between them. Structure your campaigns in a way that makes it easy to tell those results. And then always use manual bidding and track your CTR to see whether or not you're getting the good slots and how things are stabilizing before you start to test reducing those bids. So hopefully that was a useful run through for everyone. I think we've got a couple more questions. You can drop us a line here. We'll hang around and do QA for a bit, but drop us a line, follow us, drop me an email, tweet, whatever. But yeah, please be in touch. It would be great to hear from you. Cool. Let's get the QA on.
So what was the title for the third rule? Somebody missed it.
The title for the third rule was, I should have known this off by heart. Which one was third? It was make use of lead forms.
And then second question, is it possible to run campaigns with individual voucher codes?
Individual voucher codes, what, as in kind of coupon redemptions? So like for affiliate advertising? I'm not quite sure. I think, Simon, have you got any more details on that question? Hopefully we'll come back. Okay. Okay. This is pretty different. It's pretty different. I would say if you're doing the voucher codes, you should be able to split by campaign and creative. But yeah, it's far less sophisticated than Facebook campaigns, like the Facebook offer campaigns, for example. That just doesn't exist on LinkedIn. So yeah, you would have to kind of find a way of manually doing it, I suppose. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, the options like you have on Facebook just sadly don't exist. Okay, so what type of images? Simon, thanks. Glad we answered that. So, Adriana, what type of images do you recommend using for asset type ads? I would say test dramatically different things. So test, an illustration of the white paper versus a picture of people in a room having a meeting versus something completely different to that, and see what works best. Then start testing, do I put my branding on top versus not branding? Can I put some like brighter colors on? Does that make things different? I'd start with that type of thing, but if you're testing images, test dramatically different themes of images. Question from Danielle. Can we link the forms to Pardot? Yes. I believe Zapier has a connection to Pardot. So if you go to zapier.com, you can basically search for any app. So you can search for LinkedIn ads, and then you can search for whatever CRM system you're using or email system you're using. So yeah, Danielle, I'd go there. JH, yeah. Bidding versus impressions versus clicks. I've always tend to bid on clicks because I feel like there's more control. Like my entire point for using LinkedIn ads is to drive an action, and to drive an action I usually need a click first. So it makes sense to bid on a click rather than an impression. And if you're doing well, then you're optimizing the campaign well, then the CPM should be a bit better anyway. So yeah, I would agree with you completely that bidding on the click is the best thing to go. And yeah, it's expensive, but like, look at the quality of the leads and the contacts you get from it, and I'd say it's well worth the cost. Kirsten, what is considered good CTR? So like, LinkedIn's benchmark for sponsored content is 0.3%. And like, we're frequently getting ads that go over 1%. So, every client's different. Every type of campaign is different. I would say anywhere between 0.5 to 1% is good. Anything over 1% is starting to get really good. That's based on my experience with the clients that we work with. Be good to know if anyone else has got some opinions on CTR. Cool. Are there any special recommendations? So Maria, hi, by the way, are there any special recommendations for retargeting campaigns in particular in your view? I would question whether or not LinkedIn is the right platform to use for retargeting because of the cost. Like, you could do, like, let's say you're getting lots of traffic to a landing page, you could do retargeting for search or retargeting in display and reach the same people, but at like 50p a click rather than £7. So I would, the first thing I would do is test whether or not the cost of that retargeting is worthwhile compared to other platforms, and whether or not you could get the same outcome for far less money. That would be my advice. Cool. Okay, great. So it looks like, will we be doing a session on Google Ads? If you'd like one, we will do one. Yes. Okay, well, we're doing one then. Okay, cool. So, yeah, look, thanks so much everyone for joining. Like, if there are any more questions or comments or feedback or anything like that, drop us a line on the details that you can see in front of you. Assuming everything recorded correctly, which I believe it has, we'll be pinging out the recording tomorrow. But yeah, please do get in touch. Hope that was useful, and have a great evening or a great day, depending on where in the world you are. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.